Chapter 34. Confusing the Masses or Controlling the Press. And thanks to my beta, Darreldim, for going over this for me. All mistakes are my own. And thanks for voting, I didn't even have to wait a day. With the poll and the reviews, you made your choice very clear. Thanks also for all the suggestions. They helped shape this chapter. So enjoy. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belongs to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. And if you like this story, then please check out my others. None of them are like this one, but you might still like them. Alas, so few of them are being read and need your support to grow up to be big and strong like this one. HPHPHP November 6, 1992, once more at the manor. The parents were worried. They'd been getting mirror calls for the last few days about the gossip. An emergency meeting was called. 85% showed. At least one guardian for each mutineer was there, barring the Dumbledore supporters. Whispers and ideas were flying about the room. Everyone claimed their usual seats, and tea service was once again spaced around the table. "Okay, everyone, quiet down," James said in a loud voice, standing at the head of the table. As usual, he was taking control of the meeting. "I know you're all worried, so we're here to see how we can maintain control. So ideas. One at a time, please. Let's start with Amelia and work our way around." Everyone got a pencil and paper. Nods were seen, and Madam Bones stood. "Thank you, James. I won't take long. My idea is simple. Have Harry open the Chamber of Secrets to let the Department of Magical Creatures in to slay the beast," she said, looking around the room. It was a good idea, one that if used correctly could help a lot. "I like it," said Wayne S.R., slapping his hand on the table in approval. "But I don't think we should put Harry in the spotlight like that. I think maybe we should use the mirrors. That way he can open it from the safety of an empty classroom or his bed. Then you can keep his name out of the report and only call him a student." "That's a great idea," said Faye Abbott, standing to be heard. "If you use the media when you open this chamber, then it would go even better. Is your department going to kill or just capture the beast? I'm afraid I don't know much about basilisks." As a muggle, she was still learning about the wizarding world her daughter was in. She knew a lot thanks to the Potters and the other mutineer parents, but there was still so much she didn't know. "They will try and capture it first. If that doesn't work, then they will have to put it down," was Amelia's reply. "Which media do you think we should use? I can get the wizard wireless to the castle for such a historical event as opening the Chamber of Secrets." She knew the owner, and he owed her a favor. Being the head of the Department of Law Enforcement came in handy once in a while. "I can also be there," offered Zeno, marking something on the pad in front of him. He had come far since the death of his wife, and it was all thanks to the friends he had in this group. Such an event would sell lots of papers. I can even call it a collector's edition. "These are all good suggestions," James added, thankful that they could keep Harry's name out of the press. "I think we should start selling the book," Lily put her 2 nuts worth in, "if we say there are." She paused to think of a good number. 4 authors, then, that would also keep the limelight off us. Who wants to claim ownership of the book? Many raised their hands, and a vote was cast. It was decided that no one with political clout would be author of such a controversial book. So in the end it was Eric Davis, Wayne Hopkins, Sarita Patil, who was chosen because she was a foreigner, and Gifford Abbott. They would sell the book once the chamber was open and use the press to push their point. The rest of the night was used to make plans to open the chamber. They had to act fast before they could be stopped. November 8, 1992, it was dinner time at Hogwarts. Dessert had just been served when the door opened, and Amelia Bones, Zeno, 3 goblins, and 5 burly-looking men walked in. Dumbledore rose from his chair and went to greet the group. "Amelia, what a wonderful surprise. What brings you to the castle, my dear?" Albus asked in his ever-so-kind grandfather voice, the one that put Amelia's teeth on edge. "Didn't you get the memo? We're here to claim the beast in the Chamber of Secrets," she said, lifting an eyebrow. The students nearby started excited whispers, and soon the whole hall knew why they were there. "Yes, I did receive such a memo. However, I sent a missive back stating we had everything under control," the headmaster stated firmly. He didn't want anyone to take that glory away from Hogwarts. "Oh, you know how to get into the chamber?" Amelia asked in a condescending voice that just dripped with sarcasm. "Alas, not as of yet, but my staff is working on the problem, and we expect it to be solved quickly," he offered in a placating tone. We already know how to get in. Plus, we have a Parselmouth that is willing to help, she said, maybe a little louder than necessary, her tone carrying across the hall, once again setting the children into an almost frenzy. Though voices never carried above a whisper, they wanted to hear what was being said. A Parselmouth, you say? Amelia, my dear, wherever did you come across a Parselmouth? And one that is willing to help the Department of Law Enforcement. Such a person would be a treasure to behold, indeed. Inside he was cursing. Such a person should be controlled by the light, and since he didn't know who it was, that meant they were not. Amelia smirked. Dumbledore played directly into that. There was no way he could back out of his praise now that the whole school heard, not to mention one of the men behind her was a reporter for the Wizard Wireless Network. Zeno also stood by, his quill flying across the parchment by his side. Since the person is a minor, I will not be giving his or her name. She turned to the student body and cast the sonorous and said, I need everyone to go to their dorms. We are going to rid the school of the Slytherin monster, but we don't want to take the chance of anyone getting hurt. I am sure your headmaster will send your desserts to the common rooms for you to enjoy. She cast the quietus and then turned back to the headmaster and raised her eyebrow. Prefects take the students to your dorms. The house elves will bring your desserts, he complied, not seeing any other choice. The students got up and loudly left the great hall, many of them smug in the knowledge that they were right. There was a Parselmouth at the school, though they were a little let down that no name was given. When the hall was clear of students, Amelia's group and the professors went to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom to tend to the monster. One of the burly men startled the staff of Hogwarts by saying, This is it, folks. Live at Hogwarts. As you heard earlier, Madam Bones, head of the DMLE, and members of the Donk, are going to open the fabled chamber with the help of a Parselmouth student here at Hogwarts. This is history in the making. Stay tuned to find out how this momentous occasion unfolds. He spoke into a mic that was pinned to his robe. They hadn't even noticed it. Dumbledore was about to tell the man he needed to leave, until he realized it was a live broadcast. He always felt that due to the death of Pandora, he could manipulate Zeno into saying what he, Dumbledore, wanted to be printed. Amelia ignored the reporter and pulled out her mirror. She set the security and called Harry. When his face, behind a cloth, appeared, she warned him not to talk English as she was taking off the security to see if he could open the chamber. Myrtle pointed to the sink that she had seen Ginny disappear down, the same one that had the eyes that killed her. She then dived into her favorite toilet bowl and hid at the U-bend. Amelia shook her head at the ghost's antics and took the mirror over, undid the security, and pointed it to the snake carved in the sink. Open, says me. Came the hiss from the mirror. You could actually hear the question in the phrase. The sink started to slide apart. It seemed to expand and then fold back away from a deep, dark tunnel. The smell from the slime in the pipe that was exposed was nauseating. Amelia, the goblins, and the four men that weren't reporters simultaneously cast a cleansing charm down the tunnel. The staff stayed to the back and let the team do all the work, as so ordered by the head of the DMLE. Harry, who was still on the mirror, hissed again and stares appeared. Student, she said to the cloth-covered face, I want you to stay at the mirror in case you are needed later. Inside, she was smirking at the disgruntled face of Dumbledore. She knew he was upset that he didn't know who was on the other side of the mirror. They went down the stairs, various degrees of awe on their faces. Snape was overjoyed to be in Slytherin's chamber, though you could only see it in his eyes. Whispers of excitement could be heard among the rest of the staff. The Donk team was more cautious. The reporter was giving step-by-step description, things like, we are going down a dark and creepy staircase. No light is here, but for our own lumos. Or, we've come to the bottom of the stairs, and there are thousands of skeletons of small animals. No doubt food for the monster we are about to face, all theatrically spoken to make the listeners feel the foreboding atmosphere. They came upon a set of double doors that wouldn't open, so Amelia held up the mirror, with the silent Harry, to the snakes that lined the door. The people at her back had their wands ready to capture or kill the beast that might be hidden behind these doors. The reporter made sure to state that they would not have made it this far, was it not for the helpful Parselmouth student. He also promoted the new book release that was scheduled for the next day, to be sold at the kiosk, Pandora's Box, in Diagon Alley. Open, says me, This hiss caused the snakes to move around the door with hissing of their own. Soon the doors opened with an ominous screech. They entered into the large cavern. Statues of snakes were everywhere. Water was dripping off the walls. The sound echoed throughout the room. The party made its way to the large statue of Salazar Slytherin. They spread out and hid behind the statues and pillars that lined the room. It was up to Harry to see if he could control the basilisk. The goblins and the dank were ready to slay at a moment's notice. The only noise that could be heard above the dripping water was the reporters furiously whispering of the events into his mic. Now this password Harry knew from Sally. Salazar didn't know the ones to the sink or the door. They were set after the plumbing was installed. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. Harry made sure that Sally gave Salazar a hard time when he heard that. The large snake slithered out and smelled all the prey in its tunnels. It was about to strike when a loud hiss commanded it stop. Who dares to try and control me? It said to the unseen voice. Sasha, listen to me, Harry hissed, using the basilisk's name. Salazar spoke to me from the grave. He wants you to go with these men, and they will take you somewhere there is prey. You will no longer have to haunt these tunnels. You know my name, let me see you, so that I may look upon one that was chosen as my master's voice. I cannot, for I am not there. I am only here in voice. I do speak for Salazar. He gave me your name so that you may know this. Sasha will listen, he told me. Call her name and tell her that her master commands she go with this group of slayers. He does not want to see you dead. Please, close your eyes and coil up so they may transport you. Do this, and they will know you comply. Do not, and you will be killed. Harry begged the king, queen of serpents. The large snake slithered around itself in thought and confusion. It knew well the voice spoke the truth about Salazar, but many of his heirs had also spoken to her, commanding that she killed the impure of the school. She was old and tired. Maybe it was time to die. She continued to hiss and argue with herself, causing the team to get agitated. They readied themselves to cast the charm to call the roosters. The goblins readied their swords and reflective shields. Finally, the snake coiled upon itself, stilled and closed its eyes. She hid her head within the coils. One of the wizards peeked around the statue that hid him after the snake went quiet, and when he saw she complied, he took a shrunken metal box out of his robes and placed it on the floor. He cast the spell to enlarge it, keeping an eye on the snake the entire time. When the box was the size of Sasha, he nodded to Amelia and hid back behind the statue. When he was completely hidden, she told the student to ask the snake to enter it. He did, and the snake obeyed. The rest was anticlimactic. The box was hauled away. The reporter went around the room and described it to his listeners, once again praising the student who saved the lives of the team sent to capture the basilisk, reminding them to purchase the new book, They're Not All Evil, Get the True History of Parselmouth. Snape and the rest of the staff looked on in wonder at that marvel of a chamber of one of the founders, already thinking of ways it could remain open. Harry and the mutineers in his house, who were with him so that no one could say it was only Harry that was missing, went and joined the rest of the kids for dessert. The mutineers of every house had hidden away until they got the word to join their house. In the common rooms of all four houses, the WWN was playing a blow-by-blow description of what was happening in the chamber. Everyone was so enthralled with the reporter's words they never noticed the group of first years that only now just joined them. The book went on sale the next day, and because of the happenings the previous day at Hogwarts, it was sold out by the end of the day. Zeno spent the night making more. Older Parselmouths that had remained hidden due to Riddle came out of hiding and praised the book that freed them of the bad history of their talent. They gave interviews about what they did for a living. Most like those in the books were potion gatherers or village healers. There were only a few, but it still lent credence to the book and took the pressure off the student. Rita Skeeter tried to vilify the book as a cover-up, but she had lost most of her following because of the lawsuits the Potters had won. She was furious. She had had an article already drawn up to take down the Potters on the hearsay of the students of Hogwarts. Now, because of the chamber's opening being live, she couldn't use it. She would get them sooner or later, or her name wasn't Rita Skeeter. Dumbledore cursed himself for not recognizing the reporter for who he was, since his word that the Parselmouth would be a treasure was broadcasted live. He could not go back on it. He knew the Potters had set the whole thing up, but could not use it in any way. It was a well-played manipulation. Professor Watts had a house elf go and purchase the new book and used it in her class for every year, once again going against the headmaster's orders that it not be used. There were of course those that still held Slytherin as the evil pureblood that they were raised to believe. Those such as Ron Weasley, Faye Dunbar, and Leanne Jameson would not be swayed that Parselmouths and Slytherins were not evil. Faye and Leanne were vocal enough that they were taken from the mutineers, and they too stopped remembering what the group was about. Due to the vow they had taken, they could not name names, and they faded in the background and were recognized as troublemakers. They teamed up with Ron, Seamus, and Hermione and formed their own small group. No one really paid them any mind. Those such as the Malfoys and other Death Eater families would not believe that Slytherin was misunderstood. However, sheep will be sheep, and these protesters were the minority. The Potters once again dodged a bullet, and this time their name was nowhere near the ruckus. Chapter 35. Aren't They Cute? And thanks to my beta, Geraldine, for going over this for me. All mistakes are my own. And well, that was another outline thrown out the window, so here is a filler chapter until I decide if I am just going to end the second year and go to summer. Thanks to everyone for the votes and reviews. I also wanted to let you know that I spent the last few days rereading this story and came across some plot holes, incorrect names, and such, so as per usual I changed some things. I'll be spending all day today uploading the changed chapters. I knew I was messing up somewhere. Some of the things I changed are, I added both boys to their respective house teams. I had put the senior Dunbar in with the Hunters and had to replace him with Gifford Abbott. I put poor Spencer in Hogwarts a year too early and had to change that. On the chapter Halloween, I had Sally get rid of Myrtle, so I had to change that. Sorry if any of you got confused. There were some other minor changes, but nothing important. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belongs to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP November 14, 1992. It was almost a week after the opening of the chamber, and the excitement had cooled some. The rumor mill was still going on who the Parselmouth was. Because the Potter name hadn't come up with the press, other than Skeeter, other names were bandied about. Names like the Malfoys and the Flints were popular ones, and Draco used it to make connections, though he never said he was the heir. Something subtle was happening within the mutineers. Only the older students and the staff noticed. It seemed that the children were pairing off. Susan sat with Gary at every opportunity. Daphne was more discreet and only sat with Harry if Tracy or her sister joined her. Even Neville seemed to pair with Hannah. Terry was spending a lot of time with Mandy, and Luna and Spencer were seen studying together. Since there were far more girls in the mutineers, most of them paired with those outside the group. As it was Saturday, the group was just hanging out at the Hufflepuff table, which most of the Hufflepuff were starting to call the mutineer table. But since they were never asked to leave, they didn't mind that, and they were all for inter-house relations. A lot of them had made friends in other houses over the years, and now sat with them during study hour. Susan was sidling up to Gary, moving closer and closer without him even noticing. They were talking about the upcoming Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. It would be Gary's first game. Ravenclaw won against Slytherin in the first game, with Harry catching the snitch in under an hour. This did cause a bit of tension between the older Potter and young Malfoy. Gary was proud of his brother and made it well known with his cheering during the game. Susan was an avid sports fan. She enjoyed all the sports she had been introduced to at the Potter Manor. She especially liked football. It was as they were talking that she got an idea. "Gary," she said, batting her eyelashes, "do you think we can get a game of football going? I know we enjoyed playing over the summer. I don't see why we can't play now." "Do you have something in your eye?" Gary asked, concerned. "I can take you to see Madame Pomfrey. I'm sure she has a wash or something. Then when we get that taken care of, we can see who wants to play. I have a ball in my trunk, but I don't want you to play if there is something in your eye." He looked at her face to see what was causing her eyes to move like that. "No," the girl huffed at the clueless boy. "There is nothing in my eye. It must be some dust or something. Why don't you get the ball and I'll drum up some kids to play?" Gary shrugged and went to do as suggested. As he was leaving the hall, he did wonder why all the upper ears were trying not to laugh. Harry, who was sitting with Daphne and Tracy, shook his head at his brothers retreating back. Thanks to his questioning his mother after his non-date, he knew what to look for. His mum told him to leave it to Gary to ask her or let him figure it out for himself. Well, Susan said, standing and looking at all the smirking faces, causing her to blush and huff again. You heard. Let's get some teams up so we can play. Only those who have finished their homework, though. Groans could be heard from the less studious among them. Ron and Seamus had risen to join the group, but on hearing that, and Hermione informing them they still needed to do their charms homework, they sat back down. While the two boys were not part of the mutineers anymore, the group decided to leave them alone. They didn't want to be accused of favoritism, so they didn't go out of their way to antagonize anyone. It made life in the dorm easier as well. The Slytherins that were part of the study group declined playing. They were going to watch, though. They had seen the game on the telly at the Potter Manor that summer, but were not inclined to getting dirty. Daphne, Astoria, and Tracy were among them. They would cheer for their friends, though. Everyone who was going to play got up and went to put on casual clothes. Harry decided to sit with the girls and let Gary show off for Susan. Soon enough, everyone was gathered at the Quidditch pitch. One of the Upria Ravenclaws conjured a net between two of the goal posts, and the teams were picked. Susan was goalie for one team, whose shirts were turned blue, and Gary was goalie for the other team, whose shirts were turned red. Harry worried that they were on opposite teams, hoping that it didn't cause conflict. Upon seeing Susan's playful face, he figured that she was going to take the opportunity to show off. As the game was being played, Daphne once again broached the subject of Gary and Susan. You know she's going to win, right? She said from her seat next to Harry. Tracy and Astoria were sitting behind them. I know, Harry sighed as he watched his brother block a goal. He stood up and cheered with the rest of the crowd and then turned to the girl beside him. Mum told me to let him figure it out for himself, he explained. Oh, when did you ask her? Daphne inquired. After that day at the park, I wanted to know what to expect from a girl and how to know if I am being flirted with, the dark-haired boy said, a blush on his cheek. He had made sure not to lead this girl on, but she seemed okay with that. Oh, what did she say? The Slytherin girl said slyly. She didn't make her move yet, but she did make it so that Harry thought her opinion was worthwhile. She always made sure to speak up and offer advice when needed. She also defended him and his brother in her house. With all the half-bloods supporting the Potters, it was easy to sway the more susceptible of the Slytherins away from the pure-blood mentality. Cunning was the name of the game, after all. Well, it was kinda confusing. There were so many different ways one can be flirted with. Like what Susan did earlier with the eyelashes. Plus, the way she is always scooting closer to him in study hall. I mean, it is pretty obvious that she is flirting, he said, scratching the back of his head. I've wanted to tell him so many times, but Mum said it was part of growing up. She wouldn't have told me if I hadn't asked. Tracy and Astoria giggled, making Harry turn and look at them. They just looked back with such complete innocence that he just shook his head and turned back to the game. Just in time to see the red team score, he cheered again and sat back down. Daphne, on the other hand, glared at her best friend and sister. She waited until the crowd settled to get back to the discussion. So, your mum didn't tell you anything else? She asked, worried that all her plotting was going to be for nothing. Nope, that's all she said, he confirmed, not knowing that his mum knew exactly what Daphne was doing and didn't want to ruin it for the girl. Daphne let out a sigh of relief and turned back to the game. The two teams played for an hour and Red Team won. Susan ran to her friend and gave him a hug and kiss on the cheek to congratulate him. Gary in turn told her what a good goalie she was and gave her a high five, which for some reason made her pout. It was after dinner in the Gryffindor common room that Gary got his first clue. So, Gary, said one of the red-headed terrors of Gryffindor. Young friend, why, said his equally red-headed twin, didn't you tell us you were dating the lovely Miss Susan? Eichel Gary is all grown up now. How did we miss it, Gred? I'm not sure, Forge, but look at him. Oh, so cute, the Weasley twins said together. What are you two morons talking about? Gary asked his teammates and fellow mutineers, smacking them both on the head. You didn't notice the batting of the eyelashes, Fred said with a look of fake awe. He knew his young friend was clueless. Or the way she sits so close to you, said George, putting his arm around Gary's shoulders. Or the way she makes sure you have your favorite treat. Or you are so cute, they said again, each taking a cheek to pinch. Well, no, I didn't really think anything of it, Gary said, confused, batting their hands away. You mean she likes me? He all but shouted, not sure what to do about that. I mean, I knew she liked me. She kept holding my hand when we went to the park, but she said she wasn't allowed to date. I didn't think she liked me. He defended himself. She may not be allowed to date, but she is marking her territory, Fred said sagely. Don't worry, though. Your Eichel brother is just as oblivious, George said, trying to cheer their younger friend up. It wasn't that long ago that he and Fred didn't like girls either. But now that they were older, well, girls took on a whole new meaning. But we're 12, isn't that a bit young? Gary sputtered, trying hard not to blush. Then again, he did enjoy her company this summer, and they held hands all day. Well, George drawled, maybe a little. Let me ask you this, young Gary. Do you think she's cute? His brother said in all seriousness. Yeah, she's cute and all, but so are a lot of other girls, Gary answered, still wondering how this conversation even came about. The Weasley twin nodded wisely and dropped the subject. They changed to the upcoming Quidditch match and went over some of the plays that Wood was drilling in them. Gary was glad the subject was dropped and enthusiastically mused about how well he'd do. Meanwhile, in the Ravenclaw common room, "Hello, Harry," came the dreamy voice of Luna Lovegood as she sat next to her friend. "Hello, little Luna," Harry said, pulling her into a one-armed hug. "I see the Noggles are starting to float around your head. Do you need a necklace to chase them away, or did you want to talk about it?" she asked, with her large eyes focused on the air around his head. "I'm not sure why the Noggles are there, Luna," he said, swatting the area above his head good-naturedly. "That won't work, you silly boy. You have to figure out why they are there, and then come to a logical reason to rid yourself of them," she said with a giggle. "Oh, I wonder what is bothering me." "Well, what did you talk about today?" Luna asked with all seriousness. Let's see. I talked about Quidditch and homework, but I talk about those every day, so that's not it. I talked about the football game." Then he paused and remembered his chat with Daphne. "Oh, that might be it. I talked to Daphne about Gary and Susan," he said, snapping his fingers. "So you talked about relationships?" Luna asked with a cute tilt of her blonde head. "Yup, we talked about how Gary is totally clueless that he is being flirted with," Harry said proudly. I don't think the Noggles are here about Gary. You might want to think on who is playing with you, then maybe they will leave you alone," she said decisively, and then got up and wandered away. "What?" Harry called after her, only to be ignored. Terry sat down and shook his head. "You really are naive, aren't you?" "What?" Harry repeated dumbly, racking his brain as to who he missed flirting with him. "You do know what the word subtle means, don't you?" Terry asked, kicking his feet up on a footstool, enjoying the other boy's confusion. "Of course I know what that means. Oh, I get it." Dawning finally came, and Harry blushed to the tip of his fingers. How could he have missed it? "I see you understand now," Terry said with a smirk. "Well, yeah, at least she's cute. I still think we're a little young for dating, though," Harry said, settling down now that he figured it out. Daphne was cute, and since she was discreet, he didn't mind her flirting. "Yeah, I said the same to Mandy," Terry nodded. "She said her dad wouldn't let her date for a few years anyway, but it sure is fun to make her blush." He winked at his friend. The two boys talked about girls for a little while, then they, like so many other boys, turned the topic to sports and Gary's first game. The next day, while Gary hid from Susan, Harry went to find Daphne. He found her in the library and went to sit next to her. "So, I figured something out last night. Luna told me the Noggles are gone now, so I know I was correct in my assumptions," he said after taking a book out and pretended to read. "Oh," Daphne said, confused. "I didn't know you had Noggles." "It's okay. Like I said, they're gone now. Someone told me I was being naive and that I was not seeing something right in front of my face. Something a girl was doing," he hinted, and when he saw the blush on her cheeks, he continued. "I just wanted to let this girl know that I'm okay with what's happening as long as it stays this way for a few years yet. Maybe it will bring us closer, me and this girl," he said, fighting his own blush. Then he got up, nodded to her, and left the table. She was a smart girl, she'd catch on. As Harry was making his way outside to get some air, Gary came running up to him in a state of panic. He worried for a moment that something else had happened, until Gary opened his mouth, that is. "Harry, Susan is flirting with me. What do I do?" He pulled his brother outside and started walking to the lake, hoping to hide from Susan until he figured out how to handle this new development. Harry laughed and went with his insistent brother. Who finally told you? The Weasley twins. Why did you know? Gary asked, pushing his twin's shoulder. Yeah, but don't get mad at me. Mum told me not to tell you, Harry said, pushing the other boy back. Why? She said you had to figure it out for yourself. I had to do the same, it seems, Harry answered with a shrug. Really? Gary perked up at this. Who? Daphne. Well, she's cute, a little shy for my taste, but cute. Yeah. So I told her that I think we need to keep it light until we're older. She seemed to understand. Maybe you need to do the same with Susan, Harry said as he picked up a rock to skip over the lake. Yeah, that might work. I still think you're a prat for not telling me, Gary said, looking for his own rock to skip. Or maybe I can try, and I don't know, flirt back. You know, like holding hands and such. I think I'm ready for that. That is completely up to you and Susan, Harry said, as the two boys got into a contest on who could get the most skips, not understanding how his brother went from complete panic to acceptance. But then Gary had always been that way, more outgoing than Harry. He went from being depressed over the public calling him the boy who lived to just shrugging them off last year. Maybe it was part of growing up. Gary did find Susan later and told her about his talk with Harry and the Weasley twins. She said she'd have to ask her aunt, but figured hand-holding wouldn't hurt. Unfortunately, her aunt didn't agree. So they decided there would be no more flirting this year, though they did still sit together. The staff and ghosts watched all of this, and most of them agreed that young love was cute. Not Snape, of course, but most. Dumbledore didn't offer his advice, though he was unsure of Harry's choice in a Slytherin girl. He had already stepped on too many toes recently and held his opinion to himself. It was the live broadcast of the opening of the chamber and his words of praise to the Parselmouth student that kept him his position as headmaster. HPHPHPN. There you go. Hopefully a cute chapter on young love. Let me know what you think. Chapter 36. Those never-ending meetings. And thanks to my beta, Darreldeem, for going over this for me. All mistakes are my own. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belongs to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP, a medium narration of the ongoings at Hogwarts. The Christmas holidays came and went without fanfare. This year the Potters gifted everyone in the group with a new trunk. It was a 3-compartment trunk, because next year they would start their electives and have more books and homework. Those that had family trunks were given a certificate to either have the old one refitted or obtain a new one. Many chose the new, as family trunks were heirlooms, and they didn't want to destroy family history. The kids were thankful for the gift, as well as the personal gifts given by the twins. Most of the mutineers were taking 3 new classes next year: arithmancy, runes, and care of magical creatures. Only a few wanted to take divination, parvati, lavender, and salian, to name a few. Muggle studies will see an all-time low in students, because the mutineers had already shown half the second years how outdated it was. There was a petition among the upper years to get a magic null room set up in Hogwarts, but no one was sure that it would work in a magic-saturated castle. There was talk of a Muggle-type library being built in Hogsmeade, complete with a computer room. It would be funded by a percentage of the proceeds of Pandora's box, which was also expanding to the village. The secret studying was going well. None of the mutineers stayed out after curfew and used classrooms near their dorms. It was unfortunate that the upper years had to study on their own, but there was little the mutineers could teach them. Though they did teach the Weasley twins some defensive spells, and those two taught the Quidditch team, and they taught their friends and so on, so it wasn't a complete loss. The point system was finally the friendly competition it was supposed to be. Inter-house relations were at an all-time high. With Snape remaining more neutral than destructive, the points given were fair and even. The professors were happy. The board was happy. Even Dumbledore was moved that things he had been preaching for years seemed to come to pass. Although the headmaster felt it was his own doing and not that of a bunch of younger ears. The only glitch in the year was Gilderoy Lockhart. That man was a menace. His continuous bragging and gloating was wearing on everyone's nerves. The way he would reenact his books showed even the most loyal fans of his that he was a fraud. Some of the girls enjoyed and utilized his beauty tips. His constant way of using the Potter twins in class was also grating. At least the second years had learned not to jump to conclusions after the professor from first year was berated in front of the class. McGonagall had taken to have the two boys graded independently, though with what the fraud was teaching, it was a chore. The bright spot of the class was that Sally had suggested to a few of the soldier ghosts that they help the poor man along. So it was common to see a ghost in the class telling the students the correct way to do something as they mocked the overbearing blonde professor, which in turn helped the upper ears. Since Gilderoy couldn't hex his way out of an open classroom, there was little the man could do. He tried to complain to Dumbledore, but was told these ghosts had wills of their own. The Chamber of Secrets was searched by curse breakers, and a library was found. The books could not be removed from the room without them deteriorating. So the Board of Governors decided to let alumni and scholars come to the castle on weekends to make copies. During the week, after dinner and before curfew, the professors were allowed to give tour to the students. They weren't allowed in the library, but could view it from a roped-off area. Professor Watts was the most enthusiastic in giving lessons about one of the great founders. Dumbledore was not pleased. It was something else that was out of his control. He was losing more and more control of the school as the year went on. With his probation, he didn't dare complain too much. He also left the Potter twins alone. He had done more research on the twin bond, even talked to Marley, and found that Harry had been correct. If he tried to separate the twins, he took the chance of making them squibs. So now the headmaster had to find a way to train Gary, and perhaps Harry, to defeat Tom when he returned. Maybe he could use this bond to make the boy hero stronger. Maybe he should make amends with the Potters, explain how he was wrong and try and work with them, though it irked him to do so. He could use his past and get them to see that he could teach the boys, who judging by their grades could use more training. It was something to think about. Ginny missed her diary friend for about a week. Then she realized that whoever took the book probably saved her life. After all, her father warned her about trusting something that you couldn't see its brains, so she shrugged it off and became a full mutineer. Her twin brothers were ecstatic over that fact and helped her learn to keep it secret from the other two siblings in the school, which actually wasn't that hard. Ron was immersed in his own little group of friends. Percy was busy with his studies and trying to make sure he was head boy next year. With the twins' help in occlumency, Ginny now had a map and was given all the secrets of the mutineers, after her vow, of course. February 10, 1992, while the happenings of the school were going as well as could be expected, the hunters were still scouring the wizarding world for the Horcruxes. They had made little headway. So far, the ring and the necklace were cleansed, with the help of Harry via the mirrors. They had given the diary to Amelia to use to negotiate with the goblins. The goblin in charge of vault security wanted to meet James, so here he was with Amelia waiting for that meeting. They were sitting in a medium-sized room, which was decorated to impress and intimidate wizards. The table and chairs were antiques, large wooden monstrosities that were worn and pitted with what looked like sword marks. The outer rim of the room was lined with statues of goblin warriors of old. Their ferocious-like visage made them look lifelike, as if they would spring into action at any given second. Weapons were mounted on the walls. Almost every inch was covered in bladed weapons. The lighting was kept bright, so you could see the glint of metal, warning you that these goblins had fought before and were not afraid to fight again. James had to admit the room was impressive. It certainly did what it was designed to do. 3 goblins walked in wearing their old-fashioned but sharp business suits. One carried a briefcase in his spindly hands. The other 2 were armed. They marched in and sat opposite of James and Amelia. "We have examined the diary you sent to us," started the one carrying the briefcase as the 3 sat. "It is an abomination. Where did you come by it? And what do you want of us?" He directed his questions to James. "Well, we are sure that the Horcrux was made by you-know-who," James said, leaning forward, hands on the table in a non-threatening gesture. "What we would like from Gringotts is for them to examine the vaults of the Death Eaters to see if there are more. I remember my contract stating that cursed items were not to be stored in the vaults. I am sure Madame Bones has already made this request." "Yes, she has asked us to do such. What we fail to understand is what is in it for us," the still unnamed goblin said, with a lifting of his bushy eyebrow. "I would think the goblins would want to keep he who must not be named from coming back." With these Horcruxes, it is possible for him to do so, James said, not understanding the issue. During the last war, we asked the ministry for extra guards to help keep the bank secure. While the Dark Lord did not threaten our way of life, he did threaten our customers, and that is bad for business. The ministry said they would not spare people to protect the bank. So I ask again, what is in it for us? The goblin snarled, his disgust showing on his wrinkled face. What do you want? I have little to offer besides gold, and I know that goblins don't deal in gold, James asked, going over anything he possessed that could sway the goblins. Our talks with Madame Bones indicated she was not here with the blessing of the ministry. We concluded that you are a group of individuals that are working independently. We want, what we always want, any goblin-made artifacts that you may possess. The still nameless goblin smirked. It was something that wizards never gave up, for they didn't understand why something that was passed on to them should be returned to Gringotts. He figured this wizard would be the same. Done, James said without thought. He would give up anything to keep his family safe. And I'll even talk to my friends about doing the same. However, I would like the option to repurchase the items. They have been in my family a very long time. Perhaps we can draw up a contract that upon my death my children will either negotiate with Gringotts to maintain the items or give them back. All three goblins' jaws dropped. Amelia looked just as stunned. This was not something they thought would happen. And had they asked before James got married, it wouldn't have. It was Lily showing him the different cultures of the world, via the internet, that made him realize that perhaps wizards had it all wrong in thrusting their beliefs on others' beings. My name is Proudfoot. I am the head of security here at Gringotts. Madame Bones indicated that there might be more of these Horcruxes here at the bank. While we do have a clause in the contracts, we are still setting a precedent that will make us look untrustworthy. However, I have permission from the head of the Goblin Nation to go forward. The same goblin said, a bit of respect showing in his beady eyes. The other two goblins were still in a state of shock. Proudfoot pulled out some parchment from the briefcase and placed it on the table. I can search one vault for every 3 pieces of goblin-worked item that you bring me. The Potter vaults at this time contain a small amount of items. I will hand all of them to you, again with the option to repurchase them. Let's negotiate, James said, now comfortable in his stance with the goblins. James and Proudfoot sat at the table for 2 hours going over what was in the Potter vaults and what the goblins were willing to have repurchased. Some items had been too long in wizard hands, and the clans that made them would more than likely want to keep them as the treasures they were. James worked hard to keep some of the heirlooms in his family. The contract was worked, so each generation had to have a meeting with the goblins to rework it. If the clan that made the heirloom died out or didn't want the item anymore, then it was the Potters to keep, and the goblins would write it off as a loss. In the end, a time was set up to look over 6 Death Eater vaults, all of whom were currently in Azkaban. The Hunter Team 2 would bring the Dark Object Crystal to help with the search. Gringotts would not look into the vaults of anyone not incarcerated. It would, however, send a letter to everyone that had a vault in Gringotts, reminding them that as per the contract they signed, all cursed items should be removed or vaults would be confiscated. The vault holders had 1 week to comply. I have a question that has always bothered me. Why do you keep the vaults open to people who are supposed to spend the rest of their lives in prison? Amelia asked. The ministry has tried many times over the years to confiscate the vaults of Death Eaters, but to no avail. As long as our client isn't dead and the fee can be paid, we see no reason to close their vault. Besides, there are always family members that can claim them upon the death of said client. You wizards and witches are so inbred that almost anyone can make such claim, especially the Lestranges. Proudfoot answered with a sneer. He knew she was asking for the ministry. James nodded with agreement. Sirius had told him how many families the Blacks were kin to. It really was quite disgusting how pure they kept their line. They left the meeting with the lead box that contained the diary. The hunters would cleanse it tonight. They had talked about writing in it to find out if it knew what the other Horcruxes were, but decided that it was too risky. The next day, James called the hunters together to give them a briefing on what happened at Gringotts. After his report, the hunters talked about what to do next. Soon the meeting was called back to order. Okay, settle down, everyone. Augusta, any new news? James asked after rapping his knuckles on the table. Well, from what little I have put together, I know that a cup was passed down through the Hufflepuff family and through the centuries made its way to Hepzibah Smith, a descendant who kept the cup as a priceless heirloom. In 1946, from what I could find out, Madam Smith showed the cup to Riddle, who, as you know, was at that time employed at Borgin and Burke's. She dazzled Riddle with the cup and fondly stated she could never part with it. Along with the cup, Hepzibah also possessed Salazar Slytherin's locket, which we already have. She kept them well hidden even from her family members. The elder Longbottom said, then paused to take a sip of tea and to create a dramatic effect. James and the others chuckled. Okay, enough with the pause. What happened to the cup? He asked, even if he found it amusing. Poor Hepzibah was found dead 2 days later. Augusta sighed, saddened by the news. Though she knew her old-time friend was dead, it always sat wrong with her. Her elderly house-elf, Hokey, recalled mistakenly putting poison in the poor dear's cocoa. Rumor, however, says that Riddle had embedded a false memory in Hokey as he himself had murdered Hepzibah for the artifacts. It was at that time Riddle fled with the cup and the locket. By the time her family realized the cup and the locket were missing, Riddle had resigned his post. He was neither seen nor heard of for a decade. She finished with a contented sigh. She was glad that she finally got some insight to what one of the Horcruxes could be. Lily smiled at the elder woman. That's wonderful news. Did you get any gossip on what else might have been used? She asked. Well, Tom did ask many people about the Gryffindor sword and dagger. Slytherin was also said to have a cane, much like Lucius, but that has never been confirmed. Some of the alumni of Riddle's year said he took an interest in the Ravenclaw ghost. It might be pertinent to have someone question her about what they talked about. The Bloody Baron was also seen spending a lot of time with him, Augusta said, with a proud look on her aged face. James and Lily shared a look and nodded with understanding. I'll ask one of the boys to talk to Professor Watts, James said, and then turned to the three men who made up Team 1. Have you found anything? Kenton nodded. We went to the orphanage that Riddle grew up in. It's empty now, but we got in and searched the whole building. We didn't find any cursed objects, so we searched the offices. There was paperwork that mentioned his time there. Seems he was quite the bully, terrorizing the other orphans. There was mention of a cave, so we checked it out. It took us hours to get through the traps. We almost lost Wayne to the Inferi, but we got out alive, barely, he said with a shrug. They knew this would be dangerous when they volunteered. There was a cup that had a potion in it. Wayne took up the story. You had to drink the potion to get to the necklace. We drilled a hole in the bottom and let it drain out. The locket, as you know, was a fake. There was a note in the locket that states someone with the initials R.A.B. knew what Riddle was up to, and they stated that they took pride in stopping him. The poor man died not knowing that there was more than one Horcrux. We think he was a Death Eater. Then he shuddered and continued. It was as the liquid hit the lake that the Inferi attacked. I almost died in the fight to get free. There were many sympathetic noises made among the rest of the group. Then a clatter of a cup dropping on the table was heard. Sirius stood and with a drawn face asked, Do you still have the note? His hands shook as he looked at Kenton with wide eyes. Yeah, sure, Kenton said, and withdrew the parchment from his pocket along with the fake locket. He handed the note to the shocked man and waited with the rest of the team to see what had Sirius so shook up. Sirius took the note with unsteady hands, not wanting to believe what he was thinking. He unfolded it and read aloud. To the Dark Lord, I know I will be dead long before you read this, but I want you to know that it was I who discovered your secret. I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can. I face death in the hope that, when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more. R.A.B., Sirius, upon seeing the handwriting of his younger brother, dropped back down into his chair. The piece of parchment fluttered to the table from his nerveless hands. Suddenly guilt overwhelmed him. He put his hands on his face and his shoulders started to shake. Sirius, what's wrong? Lily asked, getting up to comfort the distraught marauder. The rest of the group looked on, not understanding what could bring on such a violent reaction. Dear Merlin, all this time, I was so wrong, I could have helped. He didn't have to die, the dark-haired man rambled, great sobs shaking his form. Remus picked up the discarded note and realized what the problem was. He handed the note to James and went to comfort his friend. I see, James said with a sigh. He then turned to the other hunters. This was written by Sirius' younger brother. I thought you guys didn't associate with him in school. How would you know his handwriting? Wayne asked, having seen the Marauders terrorize Regulus and Snape in school. We used to steal the homework from him and Snape. We'd hide it and then put it back after the assignment was due, James explained. Bullies in school, there is no excuse for what we did, he offered with a shrug. What was done was done. I think we should end the meeting here. We'll give Padfoot time to adjust and then meet back up in a week. The rest of the team nodded and took their leave. Lily and the Marauders spent the rest of the night giving words of encouragement to Sirius, letting him know he had no way of knowing that his brother had tried to rid the world of Voldemort. It took a long time. Sirius was too overcome by guilt. He did pull it together enough to continue the hunt for the Horcruxes, which he threw himself into with vigor. He would make it up to his dead brother by finishing what Regulus started. During the week, the goblins did find the cup, and another meeting was held. 10 goblin artifacts were given for the item. After all, they only negotiated to search for the cursed object, not to hand it over the greedy buggers. The hunters cleansed it and continued the search for more. They were hopeful now that 4 Horcruxes were cleansed.